Hunter, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Great start to the day so far. I'm about half a bagel through. Got myself a cup of tea, drank some, pumped up a bunch of hydration. We got a big training day today, so life's good.
Nice. What kind of tea do you like?
I'm a peppermint tea guy. I usually wake up most mornings. I've never been a coffee guy, even though I'll drink coffee with you. I'm not like the guy who like jumps up in the morning looking for coffee. I actually just like things that I can put a lot of honey in. So tea actually tastes a little bit better with honey than coffee does.
Are you a honey guy?
Yeah, I learned from one of my mentors that if you have like gallons of honey a month, like you'll become a superhuman.
That's awesome. My wife is in training to become a beekeeper, so I feel like we're starting on the good on a good foot.
Dude, you can tell her I was studying to start my own bee farm in Malibu. I was doing all the research on it. I started studying underneath somebody. I became like a pupil or whatever the hell you want to call it. And it was a very interesting business. And I mean it's a lot of fun. It's actually not as crazy hard work as you think. It's mostly about just keeping these bees kind. Like you have to shift boxes and trade honey amongst each other because if they find out if one colony gets weak and the other one's strong, they'll just kill those guys and steal all their honey.
Yeah, it's pretty
Um,
crazy the almost the living ecosystem that they form, and it's that every hive is its own kind of being, and they have the communication within those. It's actually crazy when you dig into it.
I like it. I like it a lot. That might be my retirement job.
That sounds like a pretty good plan, man.
Yeah. No,
when
I'll get there.
when is retirement for you? Do you think you about that even yet or not
Oh no,
quite?
all the time, dude. About 12 months to 24 months. Because in reality, at this point in my career, like I don't know what else I'm going to do to like have this big curveball experience. Like it's all the same thing, and I'm just refining it, which
Mm.
I love. Don't get me wrong, but I think I'm mature enough to know at this point that there's more aspects of life that I'm interested in learning about, and having the singular focus of being the best athlete in the world at something is so narrow-minded that you can't really do these other things. Like you know, I'm going to see my friend in Texas for 2 days and we're going to train the whole time. And then like people want to hang out afterwards. I'm like, to do what? I don't have time to hang out. Like you guys are all going to go do your 9 to 5s and you're going to clock in and clock out. My life doesn't look like that. Like I'm competing. Every second of my day is measured against another man.
That's awesome, and I want to get to that and go over your career up until now. First and foremost, why do we call you the sheriff?
I mean, it was a partying alter ego, and now it's become this thing of just a man who rules with an iron fist in every sport that he competes in. But in reality, it was I used to be a very hard partier, and I created an alter ego that was a lot of fun to hang out with.
I like that. How old are you?
I'm 34, as crazy as that sounds.
No, that sounds about right. What did you do as a kid? What kind of kid were you?
I mean, I was the kid who had the most energy in the room, and I think that was very misdirected. They put me in all these like special needs classes where they thought that I was insane. They're like, "You're just too crazy. Like you're in the room with the kids with mental down, like Down syndrome and autism." And I was like, "I don't think these are my people, but I don't know what you guys want me to do. I'm here for it." But I was explosive. If there was a
Hmm.
tree, I was at the top of it. If there was a pond, I was there fishing it. If there was a rock, I was flipping it over to find out what's underneath it. If there was a hill, I was going to run to the top the fastest. I was going to bike down it on the fastest. Nothing had to do with ego. It was just more so we were living life. Like I don't go to a casino because I'm addicted. I go to a casino to go live life. And that's what it was like when we were kids. Like we were living life. There was nothing on the line other than just like the seconds that you had in your hand.
How many years did that go on for? How many? Or, I mean, when did you start? Let's say thinking more seriously about structured sports and competition and those other that other aspect of physical activity.
I mean, as I said, I was a hard partier, and my issue was is I had to go to rehab, and by the time I got out of rehab, I really didn't have any. No one respected me. Like I had nowhere to go. I had no room. There wasn't like a bed for me to sleep in. There wasn't a table for me to sit at. Like my family always was looking out for me, but for the most part, there was no inviting me to come be this star-studded athlete or come hang out with them. I was a reject. So I had to I get into college and you're in a completely new ecosystem of people and there's obviously a new establishment of hierarchy. typically the highest people on the totem pole were the best athletes at school. And I couldn't even compete. I was on basically some form of academic probation where they wouldn't even let me train with the kids or compete. So I was fucked. And for me, I was like, the only way to get these people's respect is to be better than them. So I had to start and I had to go. I dropped out of school. I recognized that wasn't where I was going to get it done. I oddly enough went out and started doing modeling, and that wasn't where I was going to get it done either. Like, high fashion modeling isn't something that's really designed for somebody of my nature. And eventually I was training so hard, like I was whooping the shit out of everybody in the gym. I was lifting heavier, running faster, jumping higher, playing tennis and whooping everyone's ass. I was like, I think I'm better than all these people. I could probably test this out again. And it just started, like, showed up
How
my
old were you
first.
when that was going on, when you dropped out of school?
I guess I dropped out of college fully when I was 19.
Okay.
So the 20 years old, 20 years
Mhm.
old. So the year I started college when I was 19, dropped out when I was 20, modeled from age of 20, 21. By the time I turned 22, I had moved to California with a bunch of my friends and I signed up for a Spartan race and I was like, huh, I did really well at it. And I was like, this is interesting. I'm going to try to train for this. And then I went and signed up for a half marathon and I had never run over 3 miles in my entire life competitively. And I won the thing. And oddly enough, I was running against this guy. I didn't look at his bib. He was running the 10 miler. I was running the 13 miler. And we're running sub 6 minute miles, which for me during a 5K was common, but for a half marathon was like, whoa, we're holding on. We get all the way to the finish line and I edge this dude out like by like 20, 30 seconds. And I'm like, fuck yes. And then this guy comes through and they look at him and then they look at me and they're like, dude, you were just racing the dude in the 10 miler. You still have 3 miles to go. And I
How did,
was
how did that feel?
devastated. I was devastated. Like I had already, shot like I was done. I had already cashed out and now I had to go out there and finish it. And I think I finished in like 120.
Hmm.
I probably finished the 10 miler in like 58 minutes, maybe 57 minutes. And then I probably ran like a 25-minute 5K after the fact. Like it was brutal.
That must have been painful.
Yeah, it was. I still
What
think about it to this day.
what was your most painful experience in sports, from not from an injury perspective, but really from an effort perspective, the farthest you've pushed yourself?
I did a cross country ski race in the Arctic Circle of Greenland. It's the hardest ski race in the world. And I they contacted me to do this reality television show to travel around the world and do all the hardest races for a year. And they asked me if I knew how to do all these things, and I lied, and I said yes. So I showed up to the hardest ski race in the world with zero skiing experience. And everyone's in professional, like outdoor, cross country skiing lycra outfits and special goggles and gloves. I showed up in sweatpants, a hoodie like this, and a pair of like baggy ski pants.
How did that go
And
down with the production team?
oh, they fucking hated me. They're like, "Where's all your stuff?" And I was like, "What stuff?" I was like, "This is your television show. I'm a 25-year-old guy. I can barely figure out how to pay rent. Like, what is wrong with you?" So
Was
get your
that
shit together.
was
Yeah.
that on the back of the Spartan race? So you started with the Spartan race. Was that kind of your first venture into those types of endurance-ish events?
Yeah. I had gotten into Spartan race and I'd started to do really well and got myself a couple contracts. But with that, I think I just was the rising popular star of America, which the brand was built around. So I started getting magazine covers. I started getting all this attention. And, Spartan races are cool, but then someone tells you, like, do you want to host a television show and travel the world? I was like, goodbye, Spartan race. Uh, and that was incredible. I mean, I got the shit kicked out of me every day. I lost all of the events. I didn't even finish a lot of them. But good God,
What
do I smile thinking about it.
what was your favorite one?
I mean, that mountain bike race, the hardest mountain bike race in the world that goes around like Chamonix, the French Alps,
Yeah.
was incredible. I didn't finish it, but it just was like, wow,
Is
this is
it
crazy.
is it the same trail that they do in the Ultra Trail of the Mont Blanc? Is that the same
I'm
route around the
I'm sure it's
massif
very
of the?
very
Okay.
similar,
All
but
right. All right.
UTMB.
Yeah.
ends up on like one side. I think we kind of go around the other. We probably cross
Mm.
paths at certain points, but obviously bikes are not going to be able to handle a lot of those trails.
Okay, so Spartan Racing TV shows. How many years did the TV show last, or was it? Did you do multiple seasons? Did you do different ones?
I only got 1 year on that show. And then I became the face of Broken Skull Ranch. That was like a show that I was really focused on for years at a time. And then TV was never really my focus, but I was pretty heavily in TV until I was 18, 2018. And, at that point I was like, TV's cool, but it's not competitive enough. Because when you go to a television show, no offense, like they're getting reality TV people. I was just having this conversation yesterday. It's like there's a lot of people on YouTube that have six packs and they compete and stuff, but they're not athletes. They're just dudes with YouTube channels who like to compete. Like if Michael Phelps doesn't have a YouTube channel, Kipchoge doesn't have a YouTube channel because they're focusing on winning.
Mhm.
I have a YouTube channel because I like to do media stuff, but it's not my main focus. So like, if I competed against any of these YouTube kids, I would plow through them. I was plowing through everybody. And, you know,
Did you miss the training full time aspect of that
well,
from
I
what
was
you were
still
saying?
training full time and I was still like going back and forth between Spartan races and Tough
Mm.
Mudders and stuff. But, um, at that point when I got out of TV, I was like, now I want to see if I can go to the CrossFit games. And that's where that came about. Um, so you just want to kind of keep on doing these leaps. I mean, some of them were pretty absurd ones that I did, but whatever, you got to live life and take some challenges.
Talk to us about a leap of faith you took that maybe didn't pan out the way you wanted it to.
I mean, I wouldn't say it didn't pan out the way I wanted it to. I mean, obviously, like I wanted to finish the whole weekend, but the going into the CrossFit Games was an interesting experience because it had never been done before. So there was no playbook, there was nothing. So that was the most extreme part for me, and I think that probably ended up being probably a little bit of an issue and a hindrance for me. Is like I was spending so much time campaigning,
Hmm.
I really lost the essence of what made me an incredible athlete, which was like this just very diligent obsessive behavior to a craft. I was so focused on getting in that by the time I got there, I think I'd forgotten what made Hunter Hunter, which was like just certain behaviors, certain training styles. And by the time I got there, it was just like it just happened. And I was like, wow, it's here and now it's gone. So for me, it was more about the year buildup than the actual competition. Like it was like running for president. I just was campaigning, traveling around, trying to convince people that I was worth this supposed wild card that had never been used before. Golly gosh, we got it. And I lasted 2 workouts. What a slip.
Um, what was your favorite part of this whole journey of trying to get to the games or getting to the games?
Truth be told, was just the people that I met. I built like a really good relationship with a friend of mine named Jacob Hepner beforehand,
Hmm.
Sarah Sigmund's daughter. Chris Hinshaw was a really cool guy. I just met some really interesting, incredible people. And that's life. Like as I always say, fitness is the universal language. And like I can walk into a room with someone who doesn't speak any English and we can train together and smile and share a barbell or run in the mountains, whatever it is. So it's cool. So to travel around the world with amazing people who are just passionate about their craft and it just heightens the experience of your passion. It's awesome.
Talking about people, who have been your biggest influences when it comes to the way you think, the way you train, the way you behave?
Mm, used to really be a lot about athletes like Mark Allen and Dave Scott from the Iron War back in the old Ironman championship days were really peak people for me. And, my mentor, Hobie Call from the sport of obstacle racing was really important. I ended up really kind of more going towards people like Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan, Napoleon, and people that were doing things that were so crazy that you had to like really. And there was also a lot of books on these guys, so you could really find out what the heck they were up to. So I studied people like that. I studied people that had taken over the world. if you can take over the world, it's pretty easy to take over a sport. So that's usually where my biggest influences come. I read books all the time. Like yesterday, I was reading a book, As a Man Thinketh. I listened to a lot of like philosophy and consciousness books, because in reality, at this point for me, my body's not going to get that much fitter. But let's just say I'm near 100% of my human potential, plus or minus 5 to 10%. 5%, 10% would be crazy. To unlock that, really, I bet you most people are probably at their 70% potential. I'm close to 95%. And a lot of that has to do with my mind. Like my mind's the only thing that's allowed me to train as long as I have. Because most people quit before they even get to this point. And then, the other aspect of it is like once you show up, let's say you have all the tools, are you going to even have the mental ability to use those tools when you get there? Most of my competitors, I beat them because they're just not mentally with it. They have a six pack, they got a great VO2 max, they maybe lift as much weight, if not more than me, but then they drop the ball.
It's interesting because
So
when we talk about the mental aspect, there's obviously, like you said, the part on the floor, on the competition floor, of realizing your true potential that you built in training. But then the other aspect that you mentioned, that maybe is less talked about, is having the mental fortitude to get yourself through the training that's actually going to get you to the results that you want. Can you talk a little bit more about that aspect of things, of how you orient your behavior in order to optimize your training day to day?
I think like the biggest thing is when you wake up in the morning, what's the first thing you think of? And if it's not your ultimate goal, then that goal is not an it's not the ultimate. Like it's just it's an aspect. My ultimate goal every single day is at this point right now crushing business. And I'll focus on business for the next 6 months until it's important for me to focus on crushing athletics again. And I wake up every single day with like fear and anxiety in my heart, knowing the amount of things that I have to go up against. And then I take a club out from underneath my bed and I beat down those fears through actions. And actions are the only things that can subdue fear. And it's positive actions. Like if you wake up in the morning and you sit there on your phone for like 30 to 45 minutes and just cruise and just basically subdue yourself. And I wake up in the morning and I cruise on my phone for a bit, but the first things I do is I go look at things that are really going to stimulate my brain. I'm like, what's my competitor doing right now? What's the number one company in my space doing right now? What's that philosopher page that I follow? What did they post today? And I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't go and look at my phone and look at the girl with the big button tits. I don't go look. I look at the car maybe I want to buy, but I don't look at it for too long. Like I take actions and I set myself up. And if you have that lifestyle where there's enough pressure on you of fear, anxiety, and I'm saying positive fear and anxiety, and then you have these actions that you've created to subdue those things, you're going to keep on finding a way to climb the ladder. And that anxiety and fear, dude, is the wind in my fucking sails. Because you know what? I this month started with 6 employees now in our company. Do you think that's easy for me to pay that payroll? Like, I don't just like this closet's not filled with cash. I have to go out every single month and drag it out of the hands of customers, not in like a forceful way, but like I have to create a compelling story to make you inspired to want to be able to do the things that you want to do with the product in our product in your hand. And why would I do that? There's so many other good companies out there. Well, let me tell you about it. Like I have to do that. And like immediately when I'm done with you, we get to filming. As soon as we're done filming, I get in the car, I drive right back to Malibu, and I get to training. And there's a million things between here and Malibu that would be a great way to take a break, and I just won't do it. And I hope that makes sense. Like I think people should find a positive level of fear and anxiety in their life, and then find positive ways to structure it, because it's a beautiful place once you can fucking conquer that.
Yeah, it makes me think of that duality of having goals that you're trying to attain, but also be very conscientious about the opposite of that goal and the worst thing that could happen, and have both those drivers, both the up and down, that are pushing you in the same direction.
Yeah. Dude, if everything went bad, I have 8,000 units of a product right now in a room. I could just donate it all to charity, and I could pay off all the credit cards, and I'll just go be a personal trainer. I'll wash cars. Like, I don't care. It's fine. Nothing really that bad could happen to me right now.
I like the attitude. You said you were very focused on business over the next few months. Have you
Yep.
always had as keen an interest in business as you have in athletics, or did that build up over time?
I always knew I was going to be successful, but I just didn't know what I was going to do because, as I said, I like to hyper focus. I don't like to do one thing before I finish another, or at least they're coexisting piece that help each other. My business is 100% aligned with my lifestyle. I'm not a chef. Like, if I owned a restaurant, be uh totally negate everything that I'm doing, because I'd have to be on my feet all day long talking to people. I'd probably be sipping on booze, eating food all day long, up late at night. It doesn't make sense. Owning a supplement company that 100% supports all my actions. I take the products every single day. I hang out with athletes. I educate people. I train people. Perfect. Um, and I knew, like, my best year ever competing, I think I made $150,000 cash. And that's not like a small amount of money, but just to give you some context, like, it's anywhere between $20,000 and $50,000 in travel expenses for me every single year.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's just how it is. I just came back from Europe. I went to New York. I come to California. I go to Texas. I come back. We go to Park City. We come back. We go to Europe. We travel all around Europe. It, like, all of a sudden at the end of the day, that $150,000 is like chop, 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 chop. That doesn't even include food expenses. I eat like a dump truck. And
Do you know how many calories a day you eat when you train full time?
low side 4,000, high side 6,500.
Mm-hmm.
You can get into those like 7,000 to 8,000 calorie days when you just sit down with a pint of ice cream, but it never pans out. Um, I'm talking about like not a pint, like a gallon. And I do have those days, but yeah, dude, I recognize pretty early on. I was like, this is a big mistake. Like, being a pro athlete, at least in this category, ain't it? Like, there's no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And I see so many people in like the next generation, or even in my generation of this sport, they're like, dude, yeah, I'm gonna be pro. I'm thinking about doing this. I was like, don't fucking quit your job. Don't you do it. They all do. And then I talked to them a year later. They're like, I'm going back to my job.
At least they have the wherewithal to go back to it. At least that. How much does your training change between, say, those 6 months where you're focused on business, the next 6 months where you're going to be training a lot? What's the differential in volume and intensity, sessions per day? Can you walk us through that?
Like, right now, I train one time a day, 5 to 6 days a week, and it will be like a 4 hour bike ride. Yesterday, I wasn't like really with it, but it would have been about a 90-minute to 2 hour run. Today is going to be 90 minutes in the gym. Friday is going to be probably a 75-minute run, and go straight into the pool and do so, like, 2 hours there. Saturday is going to be 5 to 6 hour bike. Sunday is going to be a 2 hour run. And in reality, it's not like a tremendous amount of volume. It's probably a lot for the average person. But I then all of a sudden will take away those big, long, like 4 6 hour bike rides, and I'll take it down to like a 90-minute to 2 hour ride. And I'll start to split the workouts in half, and like, because those extra long ones really kind of flatten you out. They'll build a robust level of endurance, but they'll cut out the intensity. So when it gets to intensity, probably by September, October, then I'm doing 90-minute sessions, 90-minute gym, 90-minute run, or 90-minute bike, 60-minute run, 60-minute run, and you're just starting to incrementally increase the intensity.
Mm-hmm.
My runs now are like 7 to 8 minute miles. My runs then are, high fours to 630 miles all the time. So what happens is like it's the same amount of intensity spread out, or compacted. And if you like, took some kind of mathematical equation, it's probably the same energy output. But obviously, I work in an intensity based sport, not a duration based sport. I am trying to constantly cut down the amount of time it takes to complete a Hyrox.
Yeah, and is that what you're shooting for your next competitive season as well, or do you have other goals planned out?
Um, I'm working on setting the Murph world record again. I really missed my mark last time, but I only had 2 months to prep for it. But knowing what I do know now, like I spent 5 years refining my Hyrox time and I've taken off 6 minutes.
Hmm.
They're kind of similar enough where I missed my mark by I did 31 minutes in training, high 31 minutes. I think I can definitely pull that 2 minutes off from break sub 30. And just knowing what I do now, I can just create the formula and the success, the approach, the strategy and pacing. It's just a game.
I like the analytical approach, and I want to talk about this a little bit after as well. Going back to the way you structure your season, I mean, it sounds very coherent in the sense that you have a long off-ish season or preseason where you're going to build that base, as people say, and then you're going to intensify and get ready for your events. Do you see other competitors or maybe amateur competitors in Hyrox follow the same template year round, or do you see a big difference?
No, I don't think these guys know what the hell they're doing. And I've offered to coach a couple of them because I was planning on retiring. I was like, now that I'm retiring, I'd like to see people get on the podium or win the thing and just say that I was able to be a part of it, just to prove the fact that I know what I'm doing. And then I watch them. I give them tips all the time, and then they go right back to their thing. I'll be real with you. I have this conversation often with athletes. I'm like, a lot of athletes get to be as good as they are because they have this anxious level of energy where they cannot help themselves. The more that they work out, the more it subdues that anxious level of energy. And they don't know how to refine it. They don't know how to just wrangle that thing up. And there's some kind of beast inside of them that's just filled with fear. And I don't know these guys well enough, but they're running away from it or they're beating the shit out of it in the gym. And you have to have control of that, and you have to have control of yourself and be able to look in the mirror and be like, I competed last season and these are the 3 things that I fucked up. What am I going to do about it? And that's a tough place to be because then you have to really be honest with yourself and let you know, like, you aren't that great, but you could be. And last year, everybody's times increased, but mine did too. So I'm still beating you. The question is like, what are you going to do to make sure next season that if rising tides raise all ships, that you're not the boat that's still behind me? And that's the real conversation. So I don't know. I think honestly, I've done so many different sports. I have this really refined understanding of like, I have an acute amount of time. I want to go from being amateur to pro level. I have to do these 3 things every single time to show up and be able to transform myself. And I often make it happen. So I have that formula nailed down to myself. I just don't know if these guys have exposed themselves to that to be able to really have that understanding and that approach.
And I think it's a very, I mean, it's obviously it works. You're the prime example of this, and that's what you also see in all major, let's say, endurance professional sports. The very different layout of different parts of the season, depending on if you're close or if you're far away from your main competition event, or where you're trying to achieve your peak fitness level. Where did you get the information about how to structure that season? I mean, I don't evolve in Hyrox circles. I'm more on the CrossFit side of things, but I see the same thing. I see athletes, even amateur, that are trying to do the best that they can, but they don't maybe trust the process enough to move away from their sport for a while and do longer and easier stuff, and then come back to the intense stuff when it really matters. So where did you find that confidence to completely shift when you're months away, and then know when you have to go back and change things around to get better for your competition?
Well, I'll be real with you. Like, I was just about to say this to you. And it's funny you bring that up. I could pay athletes to come into our training program. I have a training company called House, and I could pay them to follow it for a year, and I guarantee that they wouldn't make it through the year. I'd pay them. Like, you don't have to pay me. I'll pay you just to finish it. It'd be like paying an idiot to go get an education. It's like, I don't know why. They just want to stay in that place because there's this level of confidence, at least if where they are, where they're at, they know what they've got. And I just started to look at it and I'm like, all of the best athletes in the world have coaches. And if it doesn't work with that coach, then they move on. But you notice these people stick it out. I mean, like they stick it out and they're there for a long time and they put in work. And I just started to research their coaches and I started to research them. Then I researched their coaches. I researched their collegiate platform. I mean, dude, countries that actually care about sports, like really, really high level Olympic sports, these, there are PhDs in weightlifting in Russia and China. And they literally pluck kids out at a young age and put them into sports and hone their craft. And they don't let them play any other sports. They're like, you're designed for weightlifting. You're designed for gymnastics. You're designed for diving. And then guess what? They get a gold medal. Yeah, maybe their life's a little fucked up, but I'm just telling you, if you want to be a gold medalist, you have to then do these things. So I just started studying that. I've always been the study guy. If you come into any of my house, there's books everywhere. And, this iPhone is probably the equivalent of like 5 walls worth of books. Like I read. And at the end of the day, there was just all of these things. Like if you it was a rainstorm and you put out buckets, there was just a couple buckets that were bigger than the rest that really collected all the raindrops. And there was a certain couple coaches that owned these said buckets. And what happened is I just was like, okay, Charles Poliquin has literally coached more medalists in Olympic history than anybody. Must be doing something right. So then I hired Charles Poliquin. Okay. Oh, the Norwegians have a better aerobic capacity than anybody in the entire world. I study Norwegian like methods. Oh, such and such athlete has found a way to break records every single year for the past decade. I study that athlete. And it should be very obvious, but I don't know why. Like I think so many people want to train like Hyrox right now or like CrossFit right now. If I was going to take a body and I say, okay, they're two twins, and there's a study on this. They took twins and they made one an endurance runner and one a bodybuilder. Stimulus is the difference between your end result. It's not like these two bodies that are identical are always going to look the same. This guy became a bodybuilder and this one became a great endurance runner. I would then take this CrossFit athlete, I would build them into an extremely powerful strength training athlete. And then I would slowly start to apply Olympic lifting and gymnastics. And then I would make them go for like a jog 2 to 3 times a week. And I train them like that for 18 months and I'd have a games athlete. And if I wanted to get a Hyrox athlete, I'd get them doing a 10K program and training like a Nordic skier. And in 18 months, I'd have an elite 15 athlete. But nobody who's really obsessed with these two sports is probably looking at it like that.
Yeah, it's interesting because you really kind of have to start away from where you want to get to in order to get there. And a lot of people are just maybe in a hurry to get there and to do the thing. And so they just spend all their time doing the thing, which is your competition, but a marathon runner doesn't run marathons every single day. A soccer player doesn't play games twice a day all week to get ready for the Saturday. So we have to almost voluntarily get away from the sport to then come back to it better.
Tough thing to accept though.
How you talked about the volume that you're doing here in the quote unquote off season or preseason. How has that evolved over the years? Did you always do that much volume? Has it been building year to year? Have you left a margin for progression?
I'm definitely a lot higher volume than I used to be because I'm capable of doing it. And I found out just riding the bike was just a way better way to approach increasing volume because it's just so much safer. And I would say 50% of my weeks on a bike, 20% of it is skier, another 20% of it's running, 10% of it's in the gym.
do you feel like did you switch that over when you go into competitive Hyrox season in terms of the running? Does the running take a bigger place in your training?
Oh yeah. I mean, things will change
Mhm.
and I'll cut away from the bike volume, increase the run volume because just near the end, I just, as I said, that extra volume kind of flattens you out. Once I pull that out, all of a sudden, you know, I started the season out doing like, my 5x5 running splits at like 520.
Mm.
And then by the end of the season, I take out the bike. And this is over like 3 months, 4 months. I'm running sub 5 minute miles for 2 of those miles. And I'm just like, all right, here we go. And it's just because I'm just not flat.
What would you say to people that say that the bike is not specific to your event, so it's useless?
Perfect. Don't do it. I'll keep on whooping your ass.
I like that. I had a couple really good questions from a friend of mine, Tristan, who has spent a few years in triathlon, Ironman distance, and I think he's planning on doing a Hyrox. So he had a lot of good questions for you. He asked, "What, in your opinion, what are the strength standards that you'd be looking for to be top 15, and whatever lifts you deem important as metrics of strength for Hyrox?"
I bet you every dude can deadlift over 315 in the elite 15 for
Mm-hmm.
sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
We're talking pounds, right?
yeah, 315 pounds. I wish it was 315 kilo, 225 pounds
I
for
was like, dude,
women.
this is really fucking strong.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Ah, I would not be here talking to you if I could deadlift 315. I'd be just fucking powerlifting the world. Um, I think that's just baseline. I can deadlift 550,
Mm,
but I come from a strength background. You know, I think a 20 rep back squat is a really good indicator of where you're at. And I think you want to be able to back squat your body weight at least 20 times.
mm,
I'm talking about real good squats. Um, last season I got to 305 for 20. So that was, 100 pounds over my body weight, just to give you an example. But entry level, like I think just that's such an important thing. I think everyone who's doing Hyrox and is just like weak should do a 20 rep squat cycle. Like I just wrote up a program just because I was like, this is too important for people. Like you got to do it because they get to the sled and they're like, they get wrecked by it. I'm like, well, pretty easy way to do that. Put a bar on your back and squat until you cry. Um, Upper body metrics is probably not that important. Like I think you
pulling?
should be
Do you feel-
pulling. Like I don't know. I think probably a barbell row is far more important, and you should be able to barbell row at least your body weight 10 times.
Mhm,
You know, if
mhm.
you're looking at a 170-pound athlete, you should be able to barbell row that 10 times. 205 for me easily. I do that 10 times. I could do 245 10 times. Um, and like that's just really important. I think I structure my training around 2 days a week of just like barbell based powerlifting and like accessory movements just to keep myself balanced.
Mhm.
And I do the off season like that. And then I'll get into strongman in the in season because it just breaks you down a little bit less. Um, so yeah, get very structurally strong. And you should be basically picking like 3 to 5 barbell movements, switch it up like every other movement with a dumbbell, as long as it's heavy enough to make a stimulus and really be putting it into you.
Mhm. You said you weigh about 205 right now?
Yeah, I think I can run that 52 at 195, 192. It's one of these kind of things where I started the season a little bit late last year. So if I had started earlier, I got down to 198. I would have needed an extra 3 months to get those pounds off, like
Mm,
safely. When
yeah.
I say safely, I mean like while still being able to hit my goals. I could get down to 180 pounds in a month if you wanted me to, unsafely. But there's this X marks the spot. Like I'm 6'2" and 200 pounds, and I'm probably, as I said, plus 5 to 8 pounds over the line of X marks the spot. I think a lot of guys, like you look at Ryan Kent and you look at Ronkovich, like they're right around their X, plus or minus 2 to 3 pounds of good weight. So you have to look at your body weight, you look at your bone structure, your height, and then you got to really look and see where you can change that.
Do you often run a little bit heavier in the off season? Do you do that voluntarily, or is that just does it just run like that naturally?
I mean, I really like getting as strong as possible. Like no one's going to be able to hit my ski erg times because I'm just able to generate so much more force than they do. And then same with the rower and same with the sled. And maybe you might beat my sled time, but the amount of energy that it costs me to be only 5 to 10 seconds behind you and then I whoop you the rest of the race is what you just don't put together in your head.
Mhm.
But that's pacing. Um, so yeah, as I said, I'm plus like the X marks the spot. I'm about plus 5 to 8 pounds. And I'll admit, like, there's vanity in my life. I like looking like a man. Like when I walk around Malibu and see my friends and stuff, when I get skinny, they tell me I'm a pussy. They're like, hey man, the girls section's over there, dude. That's where you got to do your shopping. And I was like, you motherfucker, I'll scalp you. And
Gotta keep the kilos on.
yeah. So if it's the difference between me setting a world record and my friends giving me shit, it's a tough conversation.
I like it. You talked about how much low intensity you do in the off season. How much of that do you carry into the competitive season? Do you have a sort of a maintenance amount that you keep in there, or do you cut it out outright or progressively?
Oh no, I do like a hybrid method where week one is low volume, high intensity, middle volume, middle intensity, high volume, low intensity the third week. So
Mm.
the third week I'll do 18 to 20 hours of work.
Hmm.
Week one I'm doing 10.
And that's your competitive season format. This is how you're going to operate almost throughout the season.
Yeah.
Have you tried doing more intensity than that?
I've tried. I learned a really valuable lesson with CrossFit. There's just like a certain level of intensity and that I could put on my body and I just wouldn't recover from it. And like my strength started to plateau, my intensity started to plateau. I was like this really spread out gray matter. Where
Mm.
for me, I am as strong, if not stronger, than when I did CrossFit, but I am so much faster and fitter. But I had to learn that to get here. So I'm not blaming CrossFit for anything. Like I think that's part of the conversation we were having earlier. I've just tested myself so many different sides of the spectrum. I know my middle. When I coach people now, like I'll do one-on-one coaching with a handful of people a year. They'll come to me and they're like, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, the most important thing is finding your formula. Like if you can work 3 days a week really hard, that's great. If you can only work one day a week really hard, that's fine. But we need to get it down because if I get 4 weeks in a row of you working one day really hard, that's where the progression starts. You
Hmm.
can't look at me and say, Hunter's working out 3 times. I'm like, yeah, you might get away with that for 2 weeks and then you're shit for 2 weeks. And like that doesn't help me out. It doesn't help you out. So you have to be honest with yourself and find your own formula. And that's why I think buying into open programs is great. Like a lot of people are out there signing up for open programs. I have an open program, but if you're really trying to like push to like being an age group champion, qualify for world championships, qualify for Elite 15, you're probably going to have somebody really look at you. And like I have coaches and consultants still where I go get my VO2 max tested, my RMR tested, my strength numbers tested. I'll have, my blood tested, I'll have my gut biome tested. Like we come back with data
Hmm.
and then we're like, okay, we're here. And then we go. You're not going to get that from an open program, unfortunately.
I was listening to another podcast of you, and one thing that stood out was on the topic of perspective and how you look at Hyrox and how you've decomposed it into its parts. And I liked what you said. You said, I don't look at, the guy that's going faster than me or that was going faster than me. I look at the best in each discipline, who's the best on the ski, who's the best on the wall balls, et cetera, et cetera. And you take that as your measure, as your metric to aim for. Is that something you did from the get-go, or did that come along the way?
No, just refined. I only thought about it like 2 months before championships because I'd set the world record in March and I wasn't even supposed to be back competing. And I was like, all right, fuck it, Hunter. Like, if you're going to do this again, you have to do something that is above and beyond. And I was like, everybody else around you is only trying to get to the finish line just ahead of you. And what are you competing against? And I was like, okay, well, the likelihood that these guys are going to beat me is slim, but even if there is a chance, like I'm going to create a reason why it's impossible. So I was like, I'm just researching everybody. And I'm like, well, what's the first station? Skier. And I was like, immediately thought of Bjorn Dialli. I have a book about him right here. And then I thought about sled push. And I remember like hearing about Bo Jackson, like tying a tire to his waist and running up a hill in the sand dunes and stuff. And I was like, fuck, no one can pull harder than that, push harder than that guy. He was just a titan. Sled pull, I worked out with Martins before he set the one world's strongest man. I've never seen a man like just aggressively move weight like that. So I just was visualizing these people because I'm on a treadmill looking at a wall for probably like 6 hours a week. And you're just thinking, listening to music, holding an interval for 3 minutes, and you're just like, and you're getting ready for the next station. You're trying to hype yourself up. Like, who am I going to fight against? Because I'm by myself on top of a mountain right now. And I just started picking these characters. I'm like, I'm fighting him. It's like, I'm going to destroy you. And that's all I did.
What do you find are the biggest mistakes that people make when they train for Hyrox competition? The ones you see the most commonly.
I mean, first thing I tell anybody, I'm like, go run a half marathon. If you can't run a half marathon, you cannot get away with doing a good Hyrox because that's your duration.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't, and that's with no extra movements. That's just you running a half marathon. That's moving your body through time and space in the most simple way your body can move. It's a running event with stations in between to have snacks at. And then I think the thing is like, okay, like it's that honesty conversation. Like, oh, like if you love doing CrossFit, then you need to quit your CrossFit gym and you need to go out and run. If you love running, you need to throw away your shoes for a little bit and go sign up for a CrossFit gym.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like it's the exact opposite of what you love to do is what you should be doing. Those are like those are my biggest mistakes thing. Oh, also, and like just number one is shoes. Man, people fuck up with their shoes. I learned that lesson. I ran the first Hyrox ever did in trail shoes.
How did that go?
I won, but I won at a very severe deficit. Like I was 3, 4 minutes behind like the best sled pusher that day,
Hmm.
and I had to catch up.
Tell us more about why the shoe choice is important and how to pick a good shoe for Hyrox.
Well, you got to figure. So there's so much like the sleds themselves are just such a you're pushing against this turf, and typically people's feet just slip out. And eventually, as the day is going on, people are sweating all over these things, and it's like wet turf, and doesn't make the sled any easier. Doesn't make the grip any easier. So now you have to have this really rubbery, gummy bottom. And a lot of people like to run in these super shoes with carbon plates, and those have like a memory foam to them.
Hmm.
And it might as well just be slick as the screen as your iPhone. And they get wrecked. Like I heard about this really fit guy the other day who was setting like world records in ski erg. It took him 30 minutes to do the sled pull. So first you start at the base. Now I want you to think about the top. The top of the shoe has to have a good shoelace system and then a good heel cup because you start to push, your heel will come out. And if you're pushing against it backwards and you're walking backwards and all of a sudden your feet slide forward, like it's just the whole thing. Stack height, there's a bunch of levels to this game, but test it out before you just show up and you're like, I got a new pair of shoes for my Hyrox, and you get wrecked.
Stay on the running. What portion of the for you 52-ish minutes is spent running on a Hyrox?
It'll be a 20-minute, 28-minute, 28:30 run.
Yeah, so it's more than 50%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's and do you feel like
that doesn't even include the rock zone? So we're looking at like a 31-minute total.
Yeah. And
31.
Despite that, most people you feel neglect the run more than everything else.
Yeah. Massively. And I mean that's the commoner. And you know, the elite 15 guys, I think they do like to run, but I just don't know if they're doing the right style of running. You just have to build this humongous off season of running and then build specific running. You know, doing track repeats ain't gonna cut it.
Yeah, it's a quite a different type of intensity, right? When you're running for those durations, you got to think it's an hour-ish event for most people, or for the fast people, under for the best. And so you have to think, like you said, your base is maybe a semi-marathon, somewhere between a 10 and a 20K. And this is going to be your reference point because this is the time that you're going to be competing for. And you can't expect to get, super good at your event by being really fast on a 3 or 5 minute time.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of really good CrossFitters coming in now too, which will be interesting. I don't think they're going to do as well as they think they're going to do. But that being said, it's going to be interesting. Like now that the sport's getting so popular and we're getting opposite sides of the spectrum, like this guy, Sebastian Conrad, came in and he's a really, really great runner, tall and big like me. But I think he ran like a 64, 66, which is great. Don't get me wrong. But then you're going to see these really great CrossFitters come in and probably get a similar time around that 65-minute mark. And then it's like, are they going to sit with themselves and give up on what they love to do and they're known for to get to 60? Because there's a big difference between 65 and 60. And then there's a massive difference between 55 and 60.
Mm-hmm. And I guess in CrossFit is going to really depend on their background too. What I see a lot in CrossFit is you have those that come from, a team sport background, for example, rugby, soccer, or other. And so they're accustomed to running. They've run decent volumes their whole life. But then you have those that come from weightlifting and have never run in their life. And the transition to running for those, especially because they're a little bit heavier, obviously with CrossFit, is much, much harder. So I would expect that those that do well probably either have a running background with their previous sport prior to CrossFit, or they've actually spent a lot of time, despite being in CrossFit, running, which is pretty uncommon at this point.
Well, we're going to see. I mean, James Newsbury did a really, I think he even beat the Ironman time that I did, but he's a fit guy. That guy's doing it in Australia coming up. I think Ricky Garrard's doing it too.
Nice.
So we'll have 2 really good data points in about a month.
That'll be really interesting. Secondary to the run, what is the most neglected portion of the circuit or of the competition?
Ski erg and row.
Why so?
Well, just from a mathematical standpoint, they take about 7 to 7:30 to get done. The sleds take, we're doing this. I did the sled push at World Championships in like 2:12, and then the sled pull in 2:45. So that's much less time.
Mm-hmm. And what are the factors that are going to usually hinder people on the rower and the skier?
Size. It's just, you can't ignore it. Like me being a bigger guy makes it an easier thing to do. And, let's just say next year I decide to put in an extra 10% on the rower and the ski erg. Let's say I gain an extra 20 seconds. That's a not so costly 20 seconds. It's just not. We don't accumulate lactic acid the same way a sled pull will. It's not the same kind of muscular tension, because you think about it, 30 to 50% of the motion is not in muscular contraction. It's in the recoil come back, So it's not that bad. So 50% of the stimulus is non-contraction based. So people won't think like that. They'll just be like, I'm going to push sleds all day. I think about it from a mathematical standpoint. I'm like, wait a second, these are some pretty cheap seconds. I can take 10 seconds off the skier, 10 seconds off the rower, or maybe even extra 5 to 10 seconds off of each transition out of those things, because I was so fit in those things. And you sit there and you do that math in your head and you're like, that's 40 seconds.
So essentially people should spend more time on the monostructural stuff, the running, the skiing, the rowing, and they'll probably get the best bang for their buck in terms of the dividends that it'll pay in competition.
Yeah. Let's just say you take 10 seconds off your burpees, 20 seconds off your burpees. Like that's a costly 20 seconds.
It's definitely not that. It's not definitely not the same. I've heard you talk about the growth of the sport of Hyrox a little bit, and I find some parallels with the sport of CrossFit, which obviously is quote unquote older, but is running into some similar challenges in terms of the competitive calendar, in terms of whether it works out quote unquote for the athletes. What is your, if you were given the reins tomorrow, how would you orient the Hyrox season in order to make it the most viable, both for the organization itself, because that has to be part of the conversation, but also for you guys, for the athletes that are competing and doing the work on the ground?
I think it's fine. It doesn't really bother me at all. I think what they're going to really need to do to diversify and grow this sport from like a sport standpoint, they're probably going to need to start doing like things like doubles championships and relay championships in the fall, winter,
Mhm.
and then go into singles championships in the early winter. And then spring is when the world championships is. Because that way, like what happens is there's so much downtime and so much dead space that it typically ends up getting pretty boring. And we need as much attention as possible on this new sport. And I just think that this company doesn't think from a marketing standpoint. You know, CrossFit was always good with when they initially started, they had the CrossFit games. And then after the CrossFit games done, a couple months later, they had the team championships. Don't you remember where like Rich Froning would
Yeah.
compete against those guys over in like Australia?
Mhm.
And then like 2 months later, the Open was happening. And then 2 months later, the regionals were happening. And the 2 months later, the championships was happening. All we have is within 1 month of each other is our basically version of regionals and then championships. So it's like that's a lot of dead time for a business that's trying to get up and growing.
Mhm.
And especially if they're trying to say that they're trying to make this a pro sport, man, you can't have like baseball is almost year round. Soccer is like year round. And you're building a fan base because people become obsessed. They just know that they can show up and watch things regularly. They become a fan. Man, I don't even remember the people I competed against in the Elite 15. Like, I'm just saying, like, you got to keep this stuff front and center often.
But then you can't switch too far and compromise the athlete's abilities to train properly and then to recover as well.
I mean, listen, dude, I've just found out Matt Frazier won 5 years in a row. Rich Froning won 5 years before that. You know, these Tia's winning. Like the best people are always going to get it done. Like,
Mhm.
you know, oh no, I don't want to play. I'm so tired. Hey, let somebody else do it then. Like, do you think those baseball players are complaining with the big cash checks that they get for swinging baseball bats and playing catch with their friends? Fuck no. Like, these people would not complain if they were rich. Dude, I wouldn't give a shit if you made me compete every weekend if I was making $50 million a year like some of these baseball players or soccer players would.
But I guess then that has to catch up as well. And as the frequency of competition increases, then the compensation has to be worth it for the athletes to compete every weekend or that often in order to actually justify quote unquote the cost of it.
Totally. I mean, it doesn't have it's not always going to come from the top down, like meaning the sport itself. The sport's got to do a better job at just getting a little bit of cash in hand. And I get they're a growing business, so you can't just throw money at athletes all the time, but that's championships need to be paid well. There's no money for the rest of the season. I
Mm.
think I got a $60 gift certificate when I set the world record. Pretty sweet.
What did you get
But
with those $60?
I didn't even cash it in. I probably would have tried to tax me on the back end. Um, but you know, you got to go out there and get sponsors, guys. Like, quit being lazy. You know, if you have a six pack or a great butt, great arms, put yourself out there. People would love to use you to help grow their brands. If you guys have a mutual relationship, great. And it's out there, dude. There's brands growing all the time. I own brands and I'm always looking for people to connect with. So, you know, that's just it. It'd be like if you're a car salesman and you just expect people to walk up to your desk and be like, I would like to buy the most expensive car here. I don't care about the prices or the funding or the rates. Here's my check. No, you got to be out there in the parking lot getting to the person before they even get out of their car. Like, jump on the hood of their car and be like, I'll sell you a car. So same thing as an athlete, like, you know, at least in our environment, like you're gonna have to build a great reputation. You're gonna have to be successful in races, and you're gonna have to be reputable online. If you can't do those three things, you're not gonna cut it in this sport.
How do you pick a good company as a sponsor? If you're an athlete and you're looking for support, how do you pick? How do you choose?
I think it's really important for brands to have their own version of identity. Like, I think it's something you have to align yourself with. It's just like another hydration product coming out. It's like, oh shit, like how am I going to explain this? Because it's already been said so many times before. If there's another shoe company coming out, it's like really look at the shoe. Like, one is the quality of the shoe there. What's the messaging of the brand? Are they willing to work with you to help refine their own messaging and help like grow yours?
Mhm.
You know, I at this point only work with companies that want to work together and build things together. That's it. Like I used to take checks back in the day. I was like, oh, what? Like, you have bubble gum? All right, I'll wear your shirt because I needed the help. I really
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
I wasn't wise enough to really understand how it would affect my career moving forward or who I was working with. You have to have a good relationship with the people in the company as well. Like I've definitely worked out with some people that suck. Stefano, you can suck it, dude. Um, yeah, like there was just some people that you work with and you just like, man, is this money even worth it? So being happy is a huge factor also. Like when I worked with FitAid back in the day, dude, it was the best. I loved the CEO, the CFO. I loved everybody in that company. And it was amazing. They really built my career. So I was so
Mhm.
grateful. And we lasted 5 years together. It just was special. And you'll find somebody like that that believes in you and wants to grow with you and wants to have fun. Like it should be like a best friend that, occasionally pays you some money.
That's great advice. To finish off, let's talk a little bit about hydration and nutrition and the importance for the race as well. It's a hour race or more for most people, and we know that in those type of events, if you're not fueling properly, you're losing some minutes for sure. So why and how?
Well, I'm a biggest believer in hydration. I just recognize that if you show up, like everybody goes to bed, let's just say I'll make an easy thing for you. I want you to weigh yourself butt naked before you go to bed. Let's say you weigh 200 pounds. You will wake up no matter what, at like 198 to 197. You just sweat in your sleep. You do. And you didn't burn fat in your sleep. You didn't poop while you were sleeping. That's all water. And what happens is when your water levels are going down, your levels of performance are going down, your body's ability to control your core temperature. So if you're running and you're running
Mm,
hot, you're losing performance. All that sweat is covering you, not just for fun, it's trying to cool you down so you can continue to push higher efforts. If you're overheating, your effort level is going to boo. And then if you think about it, it's not just the water itself, it's what's in the water. So if you look at electrolytes, have you ever gotten salt on your skin while you're working out? Like
mm,
that's your body just excreting this stuff through the muscles that it's pumping this stuff into. And when that starts to go, you'll start to watch your proprioception go. And then all of a sudden your horsepower starts to go, your cognitive ability starts to go. Like it is the fastest thing. You are going to run out of hydration faster than you're going to run out of carbohydrates.
mm.
Yet everybody's just like stuffing gels in their face and all these things. I'm like, water first. Hydration first is a better way of putting it.
Mm.
Secondly, carbohydrates. Like eating a ribeye is not going to do anything for you. Having like I used to
It's
have this
tasty.
super stupid coach that used to make me eat like he wanted me to be fat adapted, and I thought he was because he was a really popular CrossFit coach at the time. He was having me eat olive oil and stuff in my training all the time.
That's brutal.
It's dumb. It
It's
doesn't
it's
make
it's
any
brutal and dumb.
it doesn't make any sense. And I didn't know at the time. I was just a blind believer.
Hmm.
Your body is not going to break down fats, especially not quickly, and then it's not going to go into your system. And when you're at a high intensity, by the way, like I've had VO2 max done more than anybody who's listened to this podcast. Your body is pulling off of carbohydrates at high intensities, almost at 100% level.
Yeah, for sure.
There's nothing fat's going to do for you at that point. There's nothing protein's going to do for you at that point. It's just not. Your body will convert proteins into carbohydrates. It just does. Like it does. Like BCA is the reason why that's in our product. Is it goes straight into bloodstream and it will actually convert these things to carbohydrates.
Hmm.
But fat's not going to do shit for you. It's not going to do anything. So I think learning how to, in training itself, how to properly intake carbohydrates before workouts, during workouts, and then refueling after workouts is so important. That's a game you got to play every day of the week until you master it. And then that way, when you show up to race week, you're not like, oh, I ate this thing and I threw up and had gut problems and all these things. I'm like, yeah, you're an idiot. Like you decided to test your master plan the day of.
Yeah, I think that
So
that is key. Is actually testing it in training, not in the competition for the first time. And I have a little story on the nutrition part. Even if you don't compete in a long event, I have a friend who's a 500-meter rower. I think he's a Masters champion in France. Um, And he just recently started adding carbs after a conversation we had to most of his training sessions because he trains high volume all week. And he said the difference in his performance, his recovery, I mean, everything is through the roof thanks to just having enough, fuel to actually do the job. So for anybody who trains significant amounts, obviously you have to eat well before and after, but during, if you're having long sessions and high volumes, you have to think about that too.
Massively. I'll give you guys an example. I never take in protein powder. I only consume mass gainer. I take in a mass gainer with 25 grams of protein and 125 grams of carbs after every workout.
Mm-hmm.
When I see people who just put protein powder in their drink after a workout, I'm like, you're an idiot. They just don't know.
Yeah.
Because first of all, it takes carbohydrates to help push those proteins into your body at a faster level and recovers you at a faster level. So it's like, if you just spent all that time in the gym and you're trying to have progress, but you think, oh no, carbs are going to make me fat. I'm like, the muscle you want to build is going to happen at 10% of the rate that you want it to without carbohydrates. You're just wasting it. Your body has this, it's so well designed. It's telling you everything it needs to know. And then you're watching some TikTok person who's trying to tell you that carbs are not good for you. And that person's a deadbeat. If you got them to really take off their shirt and walk around in front of the camera without filters on and things like that, they wouldn't be as impressive as you think they are.
I love it, Hunter. And we're going to end on that. I know you have a shoot in a few minutes. I want to thank you a lot for coming on the show. It was a pleasure getting to know you and your world. Thanks for sharing all those nuggets with the audience. If people want to follow your adventures, where can they find you online?
If you just type in Hunter McIntyre into any channel, you'll find some awesome stuff. And I greatly appreciate you having me on, man. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Until next time.
See you, Hunter.
See you, brother.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you would like to support the podcast, please take a few moments to leave a written review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. If you want to watch this episode again, you can find the full video recording on my YouTube channel. You'll also find hundreds of hours of free content, all my podcasts, my thoughts of the day, structured presentations, and more. So don't wait, go subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.